Let's embark on the Ark Republic to hear current news that's published. More than gossip and chatter, covering current affairs that matter. We talk issues with professional views, all keeping you in queue. We wanted a higher vibe for these days and times, to free the voices and minds, reporting the sign of the times, so all can build. Let's shine, yeah.
Greetings, wherever you are in this cosmic slop of a universe that we call. My name is Dr. Kaia Shivers, and welcome to Ark Republic's monthly podcast, where I chop it up with two folk that I respect and love, and we talk about news that matters the most. First, I would like to say welcome, Dr. Sherice Janaye.
Hey, y'all.
Dr. Sherice Janaye also has a monthly podcast on Ark Republic called Political Points with Dr. Sherice Janaye, where she gives you like little tidbits of what you need to pay attention to, and what you said came down, right? And we'll talk about that more. And then also my homie, who I've been knowing for a very long time, who brings in a needed male artist perspective, Dame Crawford, aka Dame Wild, aka
What's up, everybody? Yeah, good to be back. You know, always love to sit with you ladies and chop it up.
Dame, your internet. Okay, there you go. It's still choppy.
Okay, let me move. Give me a second. I'm gonna move.
Okay. That Trump internet is a piece of work. Oh, and I forgot to Sherice. I love your hair.
Oh, thanks. It's the same hair, really. I just got the sides tapered more so that it's more of a mohawk.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, hair is expensive, so yeah.
Yep. You know, I don't think a lot of people don't know the pressure of being a Black woman and going up in front of the camera and, you know, trying to be as camera ready as possible. And the cost, you know, like the last time I got braids, it was something like $400 and something. And I'm like, okay, it was cute. You know what I mean? But that's too expensive. I mean, it's not even, to me, it doesn't add up with today's economy. One, but two, like I can't have a 400 and some odd hairstyle now I got to grow my edges back out, which I'm doing right now. So, but yeah, it's pressure.
Yeah, and I cut mine just because look at Dame looking all cool and shit. Anyway, I cut mine because, like you said, it's just, and at any point as being first lady or whatever, Dougie Fresh, you're on, and I'm like, okay, well, what am I going to do with the hair today? So
here we go. Come on. Here we go. Come on. Look. Okay. All right. No. They didn't do it in Texas. So let's talk about this Crockett, Jasmine Crockett, U.S. Representative Jasmine Crockett versus State Representative James Talarico and this election. So before we go into it, I must credit the soothsayer that we have, the political prophet that we have, Dame. And for those of you who are just tuning in, Dame and Dr. Sherice talked about elections this last year and how the Democrats were, dropping the ball as usual. And Dame asked the question, well, who is it that's fresh that we could keep their eye on? And Dr. Sherice said, check out this person named James Talarico in Texas. So I said, this is very interesting, right? So not only did you call it, right, but also Talarico is not only just a local kind of Democrat darling, but is now ascending to a national figurehead. But I want to talk about a lot of the different nuances of this election. So I'm going to let you all have the floor. I'll bring it up on the back end in terms of my perspective. There's so many things to talk about. Well,
I'll start.
Okay.
And I'll start because everybody, I could barely say the white boy's name, right? Talarico, when he first came out, I had to keep asking, how do you say his name? So I first want to just be honest about that, right? That he was so new. But he was so new at that he didn't even have any real name recognition, right? That people were struggling even pronouncing his name. But one of the biggest reasons I saw him as the upstart and climbing is and if we want to pair him or zoom him in when we're talking about Jasmine Crockett, is the understanding that Jasmine Crockett became the Cori Bush of the Congressional Black Caucus at the federal level. And what do I mean by that? In my book, The Invisible, Visibly Invisible, the Black Women of the Congressional Black Caucus, I talked about respectability politics for all intents and purposes, and how Jasmine in many ways straddled the line of what respectability politics looked like, and that the person that was far left of her was Cori Bush, right? How Cori Bush didn't straddle the line of respectability politics, whereas Jasmine Crockett did. Well, if you compare Jasmine Crockett, right, to James Talarico, she does not in any way engage respectability politics at all, right, in the comparison. So the reason I want to start there is this understanding that James Talarico was, number one, Spanish in name, right? So that there is that pool inside of the Latin community. So that's number one. He's a fourth or fifth generation Texan, right? So he's been there for a very long time. His family has been there for a very long time. He is Christian centered, right? And so all of these things, when it comes to respectability politics in particular, I felt like he was the person that the Democratic Party is looking for as this quote unquote magical unicorn that they are looking for in a candidate that is going to be able to bring together this big tent politics. Now, that's yet to be seen, but I wanted to start there to say that, number one, he is this magical candidate that they believe is going to put together the party or be able to get someone to coalesce, all different people in the party to coalesce around him because of his understanding or his leaning towards respectability politics.
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about the respectability politics in this, because there's so many different ways that we could take it. I forgot to say in the beginning, I'll say it now, I probably will edit it. First of all, it was a really good race. It was, I think, Jasmine Crockett took a leap of faith in the political structure. People thought that what she did was something that was unwise, to move from a very secure House of Representative position and go for the Senate seat. She said that she felt like she could be more effective if she was a senator as a legislator. So I just want to say that on both sides, you can't, you don't hate the player, hate the game. In terms of James Talarico, definitely playing into this respectability politics that you talk about, of being this more genteel, approachable person. When you play that up against a Black woman who's very assertive, the Black woman is going to consistently come off as somebody that is unlikable, somebody that is in the working world, unemployable, but definitely someone that is not considered, what do I want to say? Not likable, but damn it, I ran out of words. Excuse me. Palatable. Yes. Palatable. I think also, I know in the duration of her running, I remember when and her being viewed for her looks, right? So you had James Talarico, who is he a white Latino or is he a white Italian?
No, he's Latino. You have to remember that there are the conquist and the conquistadors, right? Mm-hmm. The original Spanish folks, right? And so, no, he is of Latin heritage.
Okay, so you have this this white Latino man. And then you have Crockett. I think there were these, there were these underlining into what the, I'm sorry, y'all. I'm running out of words, but there was this underlining, what do I want to say? Inferences that Crockett was unattractive. She started to be judged about her hairstyle. The way in which she spoke and the way in which she talked was considered ugly and unattractive. Whereas when she was pairing off with Trump, she was celebrated. But in the local race, she was villainized for her approach. That was really interesting. I want to say that. And so Talarico began to lean more into what I would say an anti-Black sentiment, where particularly Black women are considered aggressive and Black women are considered unapproachable and unlikable and unwinnable when it comes to public discourse. So the public discourse that Crockett was having before was okay, but now in Texas, maybe when you factor in the Southern sensibility of it, she was not.
I would argue that it wasn't okay even at the national level, because that's what really got her to be drawn out of her seat. Like people forget because the Reverend Dr. Freddie Haynes ended up winning the primary for her seat, but she was literally drawn out of her seat. She could have gone back and tried to win that, but because of her rhetoric, it would have been more of an uphill battle. I truly believe for her she wouldn't have won it as easily, even if she would have went back to her seat. So I think that her rhetoric even got them to redraw her seat, right? I think that her rhetoric, even though it was seen on the national level as needed against the Trump, I think that even that rhetoric is what triggered, right, this redrawing of her district, so that it would make it even more difficult for her to win the seat if she decided to stay on the House side. So I think, Kaia, that there were national implications. There weren't just local or state implications.
Okay. No, that's a really good point. Definitely a really good point. And I just want to earmark, that's power. Like we might not see it as, she has this mark, but really you are so powerful that you had people rearrange on the federal level in terms of the elections and what it looks like on the, and I do believe that I'll talk about that. Like, what do I see maybe where Crockett will be, in the future? I think that will be a good kind of like, where does that place Crockett now moving forward? But Dame, what were your thoughts on it?
Like I said, I go back to when me and the doctor spoke a while ago, and she was talking about James Talarico. But what I've noticed from watching him campaign, he's kind of like Republican light. If you look at him, where he like always talking about his Christianity, he comes off basically as like an evangelical Democrat, right? And a lot of the way he
is that a new term? That's a new term. I've never heard of that. Okay, right.
Yeah.
We dropped
I think he's like evangelical Democrat, and he comes off like with this real like meek demeanor, and I'm a Christian and I go by my faith, and I'm like, oh, it's like they trying to play to the middle. And more to y'all point, I think this is more of the DNC doing what I continue to see them do, like what they did to Kamala, what they did to Stacey, is like not 100% full-throated backing the Black woman, the loud Black woman. You know what I mean? Even if she should be the pick for the race. And this is a mistake I see the Democrats continue to make, because Black women are their most loyal voting base, and they continue not to reward Black women. Black women continue to save the democracy. But I say, Black women are the biggest loyal voting bloc, and we continue to see the Democratic Party not reward Black women for their loyalty by doing things like giving James Talarico the treasure chest and not Jasmine Crockett, even though she wouldn't say it out loud, or even, making Kamala Harris be Joe Biden light, as opposed to her letting her run her own campaign her way. Like these things continue, even what we see with Stacey Abrams. So I think I don't know what this is going to look like going forward for the Democratic Party, but I think there's going to be a tipping point if this continues to happen with Black women.
But let's just be real. If they would have given Jasmine any money, they wouldn't have won the race. I mean, if we look at the raw numbers of it, she was short essentially 100,000 votes. Let's take into consideration voter suppression, which was real, right? It was real. It happened. So let's take the third candidate party, take the third party candidate out of contention, who took about 40,000 votes. And let's say all of those 40,000 votes would have typically went to Jasmine. And then you stop voter suppression, she wins without the war chest of the DNC. So why would they? I mean, if the goal of the party is to stay at this white purity level, why would they give her any money? I mean, she almost beat them without the money. Like I think that's my point here, as what I've said from the very beginning. And I think that people have called me a Democratic Party sympathizer or whatever. It's not about me being a sympathizer. It's about me understanding that here in this country, there's only two parties that are ever going to be successful, and not because of ideology, but because of where power lies. As Kaia has already explained, power either lies at the state level or at the federal level. Those are the two places. And Democrats, since the reorganization, have said we want our power to lie at the federal level, whereas Republicans have said we want our power to lie at the state level. That's why you have two parties. So it is on Black people to push both of these parties to recognize us wholeheartedly. Now, the problem is the Republican Party has been full-throated in saying that they have no problem being a racist party. So it doesn't give us too many options, right? But the idea that these parties are concerned about the ideological makeup of the party is ridiculous. They're concerned about power and where they can exercise most of that power. And Jasmine Crockett was a threat to federal power, period, bottom line.
That's a great point. And the reason I think I wanted to really go into what voter suppression is looking like in Texas, because I think this is what Dane was talking about. This is what we need to expect on what's to come, right? In terms of voter suppression. But let's talk about I don't know if it's the irony or the hypocrisy of the Democratic Party, right? So one of the things about the Democratic Party is that when you have like some of these new political, young, nascent people that are running, one of the continuous pushbacks or critiques they get, they don't have enough experience, right? Crockett was running on, I have a wealth of experience, and particularly a wealth of experience dealing with in a very contentious political arena, right? So you couldn't say that about her, right? But it was really interesting how Talarico was coming off, I'm going to be a humbler, gentler legislator, right? And it's like, wait a minute. You have a guy who is, meaning Trump, standing up, calling out people's wives, just saying blatantly that he doesn't care what the Constitution says. He doesn't care now, what Congress says in terms of, war or whatever it is. He's going to do pretty much what he wants to do and openly fatten his pockets. He and his ecosystem of folk, right? So that's one thing. Okay, the experience out the door. Okay, well, we need somebody, as we already pointed out, who's going to assert themselves and assert the agenda of the Democratic Party. And right, that's what Jasmine Crockett, we all know, she will stand with anybody and go toe to toe. Okay, so that wasn't the problem, right? Then third, okay, they're not a team player. Jasmine Crockett, in the midst of her campaigning for Texas, you would see her, you were like, what was that thing? She was like Dora the Explorer. Where is Jasmine Crockett today, right? So she's like, one day she's in Jersey trying to fight for LaMonica McIver, right? And then she's back in Texas the same night. She has right? So another thing is that, these legislators are getting old. Not only is Crockett, to me, young enough, but she has a wealth of experience as being a litigator. So not only does she have the smarts, but she also, her degree, she's degreed. She's young, she's vibrant, she's assertive. It's all the things that the Democratic Party needs in order to push forward in this Republican majority. And she still was not enough. I think we need to really point that out. The hypocrisy, and maybe it's not the hypocrisy of the Democratic Party, but it overemphasizes just how much race and gender are so intertwined into politics that this whole idea of having this, let's be sensical and really let's talk about the points of whether the candidate is qualified or not are totally out the door at this point. So I wanted to talk about that as we then go into voter suppression and what you said, Dr. Sherice. They had to do everything to undermine Representative Crockett, and she still almost won. And so for those of you who are not aware of the voter suppression that definitely did happen in Texas was prior to this. So we talked about the gerrymandering, right? So they were try to remix the districts in order to displace folk like Crockett. And if y'all don't remember, was this earlier in the year? Was this last year when a whole bunch of Texas legislators left in protest so they wouldn't have to
last year.
That was last year, right? And then they held the Black woman hostage. They held a Black woman hostage, right? These Texas Republicans, right? This is the Wild Wild West. So all of this is, leading up to this very contentious race. So we have to earmark that. But the voter suppression, particularly what's going on in this Crockett Talarico, was the changing of the precincts and how prior to the election, the Republican Party made it where you could Republicans voted at their own precinct and Democrats had to vote at their own on the day of election. Prior to early voting, it was different. So when people went on the day of the election, they were confused about where to go, which subsequently caused people having to travel across town if they then got there, because a lot of voters probably just didn't vote. So
exactly.
Right. And so in all of that, only 100,000 short, right? But also and Sherice, you could talk about this if you heard this. The Republican Party wants Talarico to run because they know that Talarico is a weaker candidate. Did you hear that one?
So let me address a few of these. Number one, we have to remember that there are far more senators that become president than any other elected official in the United States. As of my last tally, 17 senators have, and I talk about all of this in my book, 17 senators rose to then being president of the United States. That is why, if we think about Black women in the Senate, we know of 3, right? So let's just talk about, first off, the idea of not just winning the primary. Let's just talk about the actualization of a Black woman then being in the Senate. And one of those Black women became vice president of the United States. So I want to chart out this. I want to go back, Kaia, to this thing about power, right? About how much power Black women actually have, right? Because the idea that Kamala Harris becomes senator of the state of California and then goes on to be vice president, that is scary for white folks across the country, regardless if you're a Democrat or a Republican. That is scary, right? And Jasmine Crockett, as you've already said, is poised in many ways to be the next iteration of that. Not only is she well educated, she's been educated in their system, right? She's not HBCU educated, right? Yeah, she made Pledge Delta and all that, but she's been educated in their system. She's making goob gobs of money, right? Because remember, they were digging through how much money she was making to try to figure out how's this little nigger girl even flying around the country this way, right? So I want to situate this in the power, because to me, that's what this voter suppression is all about. It's about the power that we keep diluting or thinking that it's not powerful. We keep looking at the fact that our candidate didn't win or who we want didn't win, instead of zooming in on how much power we actually have for them to go to these links. And to answer the direct question about Talarico, let's just be 1000% clear. Talarico is definitely the weaker candidate. And Talarico's the weaker candidate because he does not have as much experience. He doesn't have as much experience when it comes to combat and litigation. He doesn't have the same kind of experience as far as dissecting legislation and understanding where Republicans hide things inside of bills. He has no federal experience as far as appropriations committee bills, as far as sitting on in key places of committee representation at the federal level. He has none of that. He has none of that as a background. All he has is state representation experience. And that state representation experience has been while the Democrats have been in a minority in Texas. So he doesn't even understand what it means to be in the majority in power. And if the midterms shape up like we see that they are, because I think that this voter suppression early means that people are going to become more upset and be more emphatic about staying in lines. It means that Democrats then take the House back. And what does that mean for a white Latino that has no experience of being in the majority? So all of these things, I think, again, it coalesces, Kaia, around power. And I think that's the thing that I think we are so focused on who the person that's running is, and all of, we're not really tapping into the power that we possess even without their money. Dame, I'll kick it to you, but that's the big thing for me is the power.
Or even without the full frontal support of the Democratic Party, black and white. We also must put that in, right?
Well, and I think this goes back to what I was saying earlier about real progressives. The Democratic Party does not want real, true progressives. So when you talk about candidates like Jasmine Crockett, when you talk about the AOCs, when you talk about what's my man in Atlanta, when you talk about those guys, the true progressives, they don't really get all the way behind the true progressives, because the Chuck Schumers and Nancy Pelosi's of the world, they're about incremental movement. They don't want real progress in the party, because real progress does mean upward movement of black folks, which means upward movement of black power in the Democratic Party. And they try as much as they can to try to squash that black power, just like Nancy Pelosi and all them was working behind the scenes to go against Kamala, right? There is literally a concerted effort to go against the real progressive candidates, and it just so happens that a lot of the real progressive candidates are black women.
Because black women are on the ground. I mean, I think in terms of negotiating, with the status quo, we I think are the ones who have to be conscious and engaged at all times. Like, we're keep the head on the swivel. That's how I think we kind of think through.
Well, I always say, black women are the best champions, because the black women are the only ones who can see from a bird's eye view what everybody's going through. Like, black women are the only ones who sees everyone's oppression. Like, black women can see everyone's oppression, because black women have, you have the oppression of being a woman, you have the oppression of being black, and then you have a combination of being a black woman. So y'all see a bird's eye view of what oppression looks like from that other, even black men don't see, because we don't deal with the gender side of it, right? So y'all see oppression from a different viewpoint, so therefore you guys tend to be the best.
Dame, we lost you. Go ahead, Sherice.
I think, and even to piggyback on what Dame is saying about that, not only that black women, for the most part, and nothing's 100%, but for the most part, black women are more concerned about the collective. We're more concerned about the collective of people. And my husband and I talk about this all the time as to why black men don't want black women preachers in the space. Because black women are going to hold you accountable far more. They're far more likely to hold you accountable, and they're far more likely to hold you accountable because they're concerned about the collective. This intersecting oppressions that we often deal with, as Dame talks about, allows for a particular viewpoint. But that particular viewpoint then makes us champion the collective, because we understand that it doesn't have to be a winner-take-all system. There is ways in which that some may have to sacrifice, but it doesn't have to be this winner take all. And I think that is the power I keep referring to or keep pointing to, is that if we let too many Black women rise, it effectively changes the entire system. And that's something I argued in one of in my latest books. You let Black women start rising in the power structure itself changes. And that's exactly what they're trying to prevent. They don't want the power structure to change. They don't want the Democratic Party to change. They want recalibrations, as Damus. They want incremental movements. They want recalibration.
And on that note, I also want to say too is that I think what makes, I'm going to talk more a little bit about the Black male uncomfortability when it comes to Black women. I think that's important, especially when you're talking about the Black church. In the past, a lot of the position of Black women, especially like my mom, and maybe those a little bit younger than my mom and right before me, is that I know as a Black woman that there's a lot of misogyny in the church or in these streams of power. These are the things like Harris, Kamala Harris went through, right? And I know that I probably am the better choice in terms of being in a leadership position, but because of the structure and what we've gone through, I'm going to fall back and I'm going to push this Black man with all of his flaws and his dirty draws, and let them do the lead. I think the switch that has happened is, for the first time, more Black women are putting their investment in Black women openly. And that is a Black male uncomfortability. And it's a certain type of Black woman that they're putting their investment in, because somebody like a Jasmine Crockett will be considered socially, that's a little bit too coarse for me. She's a little bit too uncouth. Because of her delivery, because it's not within this respectability politics that you talk about. I think that's important. I also wanted to bring up this idea that was coming in this Talarico Crockett, and maybe we could talk about, I'll push that into this question for both of you all. Now that we have seen the Crockett and Talarico race primary play out, how is this an indicator of what we're going to see in primaries and midterm elections in 2026?
Well, one of the biggest things that I think it indicates is that we are going to have to be very clear about the strategies we're going to use as far as voter dilution and voter suppression. So voter dilution and voter suppression are two different things, and I think they often get pushed together. What do I mean by voter dilution? What I mean by voter dilution is is really when we talk about this voter apathy or the apathetic voter. I think that we are going to have to be careful to galvanize those apathetic voters so that it doesn't dilute the power that we have. So voter dilution, we've seen there's more formal strategies on voter dilution, which are the idea of carving districts particular ways, packing people into one district, cracking. So there are these formalized ways, but I think that the informal ways are then pushing voter apathy. And I think that's a part of voter dilution. So I think that's the first indicator, is this situation became so crazy. Do I just throw up my hands and say, forget it, I'm not going to vote at all? So voter dilution. Then voter suppression, which I think is different, right? Voter suppression is the active the activity of ensuring that you don't vote. And what I mean by that is, and there's formalized ways of doing that. We've seen a law pass the House, I don't think it's going to go anywhere in the Senate, about making women, Kaia, going back to your point, having to present, identification with their married name, not their maiden name on it, to be able to vote, right? Again, this is, to me, that's more of an act of voter suppression, right? By taking people that were already eligible and active voters and suppressing them from voting, right? That's different than trying to dilute or trying to siphon off those that are apathetic about voting altogether. So to me, this is a signal that civil rights organizations, church organizations, mosques, right? All of these places where communities meet need to come up with strategies about how they're going to first deal with voter dilution, and then how are they going to deal with voter suppression.
Dame, the question that, I don't know if you heard the question that I put forth, knowing that, in our, you said bird's eye view of the Crockett and Talarico race that just happened, what does this look like or how's this going to play out in terms of the midterm elections and the coming primaries?
Well, I think the midterms are going to be interesting because this should be an easy win for the Democrats just because of how bad and how terrible this administration has been, not only for the Democrats, but even for the Republican constituents. Like, this is the first time ever we've seen this many people turning on MAGA. This is the first time ever we've seen people who are starting to feel remorse for their vote for Trump, or feel like they made the wrong choice. Um, but my question is, bigger than the midterms, who's next? Who's the next real Democratic star? Because I don't see it. I don't see it right now. I know they're trying to push Gavin Newsom as much as they can as that guy, but I think Gavin Newsom has had a lot of missteps. Gavin Newsom has a lot of detractors from some of the legislation that he's made in California. So I don't know who that next Democratic star is. And that's the scary part for me, because you have somebody you teed up to win an election, but it's almost like you don't have a Barack Obama to step in there. You know what I mean? Like, who's going to be that new fresh looker that's going to slide in there? And for, like I said, for the midterms, if the Democrats mess this up, I don't, if they mess up these midterms, I don't know if it's ever going to be any coming back from the Democratic Party.
I think for me, those are good questions. For me, I think that the approach has got to be, we have to move away from this savior, right? This one person that carries it, and we have to move to a multi-pronged person, like different people, and maybe like a crew or a collective. I know that there was this attempt, or there's might still be the attempt with the I forgot what they called the squad, right? But I think that we need to have like pockets in different regions of folk that we can lift up, whatever that looks like. Independent, Democratic, that's one. I think another thing we have to focus on, Sherice talked about voter dilution and voter suppression. We also have to talk about voter malaise, which is something that I talked about last year when I was covering New Jersey politics, and this idea of feeling so helpless that voting is like the last thing that registered voters want to do. In New Jersey, a huge part of the problem was the economic gap. Well, economic gaps that were happening, housing issues, employment issues, gentrification. So I've been saying this, we got to get to the midterm elections first. And so how are these local officials and even folk in the community, how are we going to address what everybody is already predicting, food shortages? How are we going to address these federal workers who have yet to find jobs? How are we going to address that so they could make it to the polls and deal with all of the blockages that are being put in place for the midterm? So for me, we have to address the voter malaise. I think another thing what clearly a lot of political figures are seeing is that they're going to have to do something about their attachments and tetherings to Israel. That is something that came up in the Crockett Talarico thing. How Crockett was, one of the criticisms that they had was that, oh, well, she got money from a pro Israel PAC or lobbyist. But what a lot of people were not saying was that Talarico got $500,000 for, I forgot the guy's name, but I think the last name is Reed, but he appears in the Epstein files, and as being one of a key figure in the Epstein files. But I think people are trying to kind of slowly and quietly push themselves away. Honestly, I think that with Crockett leaving, I think she can reinvent herself. But I think that's something, because there was a report that came out about Harris and said that her response to how she was going to deal with the Gaza Gaza Strip and the Palestine issue was one of the dents in terms of her electability or the election. So I think that that's something that has definitely is going to have to be addressed. A lot of the younger voters are going to be definitely pushing that line. Like, what is your stance on this?
So if we are going to transition there, I think that Israel is a noose on the United States neck, but it's a designed noose that's never going away. And it's a designed noose that's never going away because it gives us a bird's eye view into the made up region of what we call the Middle East. There is no such region. It is actually Western Asia. So it's a made up region in the world that Israel is a key partner to, so that it gives us a bird's eye view and allows us to essentially tie together Europe. It ties together Europe and Western Asia, right? Which is why we see in Iran, China getting involved in Iran, because we're not talking about the Middle East. We're actually just talking about Western Asia. And so I think when it comes to Israel, from a geographical standpoint, from a geopolitical standpoint, that Israel is not a noose that we're going to free ourselves from. And I think that candidates moving forward, when we're talking about Israel and our affiliation, need to be clear about being okay losing if they go against Israel. And I think that needs to be something that they are very clear on, and they understand that if they take the moral position or take a moral high road about Israel, that then they are in many ways deciding that they want to lose. Now, what I'm saying here, though, is I don't think that Israel needs to go without critique. I do think that Israel needs to go with some level of critique. And I believe that the Democratic Party is the only party poised to able to provide some level of critique in a nuanced way, because Republicans are all about writing them a blank check and letting them do what they want to do. And so I do believe that going against Israel in any way guarantees a loss. But I also believe that Democrats are the party poised to be able to put together a nuanced argument as to what Israel must do as far as gaining the support of these United States.
Okay, any thoughts on that, Dame?
No, I just like to say that I agree with her. I agree with her on all points, and I also thought it was interesting the way the questions was poised to Crockett about her allyship or whatever to Israel. It wasn't poised the same way, post answering questions about Israel. And I think that's something we need to look at as well. And as we continue to, trek through this Israel-Iran thing, like, it's such a huge mess, So I don't know what the Democratic Party is going to do going forward, because we know in this country, if you're not fully throated saying you're pro-Israel, you're going to be called anti-Semitic. Even treatment and be a change, and being able to say free Palestine and not being automatically put in that anti-Semitic boat just because you say free Palestine.
Yeah, I do. Well, for me, I believe that all things are temporary. And that's just the dance that a lot of the political figures are definitely have to play with. Our eye will be on Cori Bush, because Cori Bush has a very particular stance in terms of not taking certain monies. I would like to also add, people need to be comfortable with either losing or being a one-term elected official. And what does that look like if you one term? Have somebody else come behind, but whatever that looks like. What I have been I've just been really listening to what a lot of people are saying. And right now in this, and we're going to talk about Iran, but with this, they don't want to call it a war, but this US-Israel war against Iran that's going on, people are really coming out and heavily critiquing and really talking about ways of how to really deal with these power players and why Israel has so much sway and influence in the global order of things, and what could happen, or in order to remove it, or the disruption of it.